So when we went from the 113th Congress, the election of November of 2014, and then we went to the 114th Congress where Republicans had a majority in both chambers, there was some hope that my colleague expressed. I remember having a conversation with him right after those elections in November of 2014, and he said that he was somewhat optimistic that maybe we could get an immigration reform bill passed by Congress. The question of whether or not President Obama would sign it or not was a completely different matter, but he was optimistic that because now the Republicans had majorities in both the House and the Senate, that maybe we could get that immigration reform bill. For better or for worse, they didn't. They never came up with a immigration reform bill to send to the president. So it's your speculation, my speculation, whether or not President Obama would have signed something. But I would attribute that to the fact that even though in the 114th Congress you have Republicans that have a majority of the seats, the ideological divide among Republicans, particularly in the House of Representatives, was too great. Right? You had these conservative Tea Party Republicans who had their vision of immigration reform, and then you had these moderate Republicans in the House who had their version of immigration reform, and that's where the problem existed, I think, in that particular example. Okay? Now, I want to wrap this up by suggesting to you a way to overcome these very frustrating periods where we have either form of divided government, but particularly the second form. Gridlock or stalemate can be overcome by unified party government. And that's the situation where one party has both the presidency and has majorities in both chambers of Congress. Now, as we go from the 114th Congress here to the 115th Congress, which doesn't appear on the screen, right? But you know how the election came out last Tuesday, right? Who won the presidency? Is he a Democrat or a Republican? Well, presumably he's a Republican, right? And we just said a moment ago that the Republicans have majorities in both the House and the Senate, although we noted that they're very slim majorities. So if you're a very optimistic kind of person, you may be thinking, okay, well, maybe finally we can get a break in the stalemate, right? That we can sort of clear that logjam and maybe something will actually get done in Washington. Well, we'll have to wait and see. Remember, these majorities that we're going to see in the 115th Congress are pretty small. And many Republicans have questions about whether or not Donald Trump is a true Republican. But all that has to be worked out. But what we can do is look at the historical facts. Right? So here I want to share with you the example of the 111th Congress. If you look at the numbers in the 111th Congress, that would have been after the election of 2008, when President Obama was elected to his first term. And we know now that we've said many times that President Obama, of course, is a Democrat. And you can see that the Democrats had majorities in both the House and the Senate, and bigger majorities than we've seen since then, right? Almost 59% majority here in the House, and 57% majority in the Senate. Now, I'm going to press you a little bit here. I'm going to test your recall, your memory a little bit here, okay? Can you think of, are you aware of any significant legislation that was passed by Congress during that particular period, that period from 2009 to 2011? Can you think of any, over the last, since the 111th Congress, the 112th Congress, the 113th Congress, the 114th Congress, we'll see about the 115th Congress, okay? But certainly in those three, 112th, 113th, and 114th, there's really been no significant legislation passed by Congress. Are you all aware of this fact that many of your fellow Americans, when they express frustration with what's going on in Washington, right, what they're saying is that they're not getting anything done, right? Is this something that you're somewhat aware of? That many Americans have this idea that we elect these people and we send them to Washington and they don't seem to do anything. They just seem to bicker with each other, right? They just seem to, argue with each other, right? Well, there is a case to be made that very little has been done in terms of legislation, in terms of significant legislation, either in the 112th, the 113th, or the 114th Congress. And Can anybody guess what I would attribute that to? How would we explain that? Why has there been very little done? Very little significant legislation passed in any of those three, 112th, 113th, 114th Congress? What?
Because there was a stalemate between gridlock.
And what is that stalemate or gridlock attributable to?
The small margin between Democrats and Republicans.
The closeness of it all, right? That's true, but also more precisely, divided government. Either form of divided government, either the first or the second form of divided government. Here we have the first form of divided government, right? In the 114th Congress, and then in the 113th Congress and the 112th Congress, we have the second form of divided government, right? That's what Professor Bianco is saying, that you probably shouldn't expect much to get done when you have divided government, particularly the second form, okay? But now, when we go back to the 111th Congress, not only do we have a Democratic president, but we have larger Democratic majorities, 57, 58% majorities, or 57, 59% majorities in each chamber respectively. And I'm asking you, okay, if Professor Bianco is on to anything, if he's right, if Professor Bianco and other political scientists are right when they say don't expect much legislation to be passed by Congress when you have divided government, then we might infer from that, could we not, do you think it's fair to infer, that the prospects for Congress passing more significant legislation are more likely when you have unified party government, when you have a president and both chambers of Congress in the hand same political party. Would that be a reasonable inference to make, do you think? Should I set that up again? Do I need to say that again? Okay. Is that too many ideas out there at one time? Let me say it again, okay? Here's what Professor Bianco is saying, okay, and other political scientists are saying. When you have, as you had here in the 112th and the 113th Congress, when you have one political party controlling the Senate and another political party controlling the House, you're almost certainly not going to get significant legislation. When you have the first form of divided government, which you had here in the 114th Congress, a president of one party and, in this case, a Democratic president and Republican majorities in both chambers of Congress, don't be too optimistic about the prospects of getting significant legislation passed. Everybody with me on that, right?